All right. So welcome everyone for another All Core Dev at Celo. For this call, we're going to go over two different proposals. CIP 33, which is adding the Celo Euro to Celo. And then after that, we're going to go over CIP 32, which will go over node, incentive for attestation service nodes. Let me first try to share the screen, right? Like share the screen, and I think this
And, just as a quick point of order, last call was donut. The last Celo All Core Devs call was the last call for donut EIPs. That was a very cut and dry, we're going, announcement of plans. This is more of a technical review of a couple ongoing, a couple proposals with ongoing work.
Right.
So that the people who are writing those talk about them, give short presentations, and go over what we're pursuing and why.
Right. Exactly. So this is going to be a technical deep dive into each proposal. And I think when we have these kind of proposals, we also want to explore if there's any way we can standardize or have a format for, these kind of proposals. So is Nadeem in the room by any chance?
Yes. Hey.
Okay, cool.
Hi.
Awesome.
Just a clarifying question. Yes, how much time do we have? Is 20 minutes plus questions for each proposal?
That's good. That's a good question. So you have currently, sorry to say, 24 minutes. We just wanted to get people in there. So if you can combine your 24 minutes for both presentation and Q&A, that would be really useful. So with that, let's get started. I'll type in the chat when there's a 10-minute left for your slot, so you can time it with Q&A and stuff. So yeah.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay, great. Then I get going, I guess. Great. Yeah, hello everyone. We have started already in last week's governance call to discuss this a little bit. I will repeat a little bit to catch other people that were not on the call last week. So as just said, this is going to be a proposal to extend the ecosystem of stable assets on Celo, and we're proposing to use Celo Euro as the first one and as a pioneering project. It will require us to deploy the Celo Euro as the first asset, of course. It will mean an extension of the existing stability mechanism, and it will also require us to add oracles to enable the stability mechanism. In short, the proposal that we have is to choose an extension of the current stability mechanism, which means adding just another module of the existing one for Celo Euro. This is also kind of would lay the ground for further stable assets that could be added in the same way. So from here, maybe I just hand over to Volker so he can go through the changes that are necessary to do though, and I will later talk about the rationale and the analysis that we did to come up with the decision to use this what we call independent Mento approach.
Yeah, thanks, Nadeem. So we want to try to make this a straightforward approach to have Celo Euro's work independent of Celo Euro. And there's a bunch of reasons for doing that, is to minimize the amount of work needed for the smart contracts, and with the risk of introducing new bugs or side effects that we are very familiar with. And also because we want to have this property, at least early on, that everything that is true for Celo dollars, it will probably hold true for Celo Euro. So it will be an extension. The way of doing is it will be deploying Celo Euro from scratch with the proxy and the implementation. And the implementation can potentially be independent, but at the beginning, we will point it to the same implementation as Celo dollars. And the same thing applies to the exchange. We'll deploy another exchange proxy for the storage, and we will point to the same implementation that the currently exchange we have. This also requires to update of the registry. If you are familiar with the registry, currently Celo is called a stable token, and the exchange is just called exchange. So we'll probably leave that there for compatibility, but we will add one for $0 explicitly, one for $0 exchange explicitly, and then we will add one for the registry, the Celo Euro, a stable token, and the Celo Euro exchange. In that way, as they're independent, one of the reasons they're independent, and Nadim probably goes through the theory of that, is that we wanted to avoid deep ledges by trading one asset for the other one, because it's not very intuitive, but if you trade Celo dollars for euros, you are pledging two and generating an arbitrage opportunity. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to have that independent. There are some other miscellaneous things that we need to add. For example, we need to allow the Celo Euro to be a gas currency so that people that only have Celo Euro in their wallet are able to pay for gas. We need to extend the contract kit to support Celo Euro, which is not a huge challenge as it already supports the dollar. It will pretty much change the name and an address. And we will have to deploy the oracles. The oracles need to depend on this stable token, and it's going to be reporting the price of Celo in euro. Not really other than that should change. We have a small contract change that the currently reserve contract that we have deployed on mainnet, that issue 6165 that you see on the screen, only supports one exchange. It had Celo dollar exchange hard coded, so it was the only exchange able to pull money out of the, or pull Celo out of the reserve without a daily limit. That needs to be extended, and now we have a list of exchanges that are allowed there. And that is for the Celo Euro, if I am not forgetting anything.
Okay, then let's go to the rationale.
Do you need the notebook out, Nadim?
No, but maybe Jazz could scroll down a little bit to the rationale. Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, we had a lot of thinking going on, and of course, there were many discussions, and these questions that we listed here are trying to reflect a little bit what we are thinking about. Of course, the first thing that was important to us, we wanted to have this extension to have the same level of control that we would have currently. So we are thinking if we're changing something and we have less control about the cash in and outflows as we have now, then this is something that we would not like to have. The next thing was, how difficult is this to implement? And this is what Wolpe mentioned. Then it's about the convergence. I will talk about this later, but we were kind of thinking about, if we have these approaches, we have this independent mento, for example, and the multi-mento, is it possible that if I have an update of the tanks and I start arbitrage, is it possible to reach an equilibrium? An equilibrium means for me that the on-chain price is equal to the market price. And this is not all clear, because especially in the case of having the multi-mento approach, I have a link between the Celo Euro and the Celo US transactions and prices. Then the question is, how fast is this conversion speed? Then can we scale this? I mean, the whole idea is to have a pioneering project that will allow us to add other coins. So the question was, can we add to this? One question was, can we have cheap, direct, stable asset swaps? So can we change Celo Euro into Celo USD? We can do this right now with the independent mento indirectly. but we cannot do it directly. So this was kind of something that we thought about. Then there was the question, how do we deal with the low liquidity? And linked to that, if we have low liquidity, if we need another oracle, can we use fiat exchange rates to convert a Celo USD quote to a Celo Euro quote? And having all this in mind, we were thinking, what is the natural extension? And for us, there were two natural extensions. The first one is this independent mentor, which means adding another module. And the second one is kind of multiplying another one. If you look at the equation, the first two factors are just the standard constant product market maker with two factors. And if you just multiply a third one, you kind of get another canonical extension of the current setup. So these were the two that we had in mind. And when we did our analysis, and if you scroll down to comparison, just thanks, then we found something interesting. Of course, I mean, this is just our modeling setup, but we found something interesting. The overall convergence speed was roughly on the same scale. So in our test cases, we saw that the convergence to what we call equilibrium and also into the pack is roughly the same. Of course, there are slight differences. What we have seen is that the independent mentor has a slightly faster convergence in the tail. If we look at the plots later, you will see what I mean with this. On the other hand, the multi-mentor, which is the three-factor approach, it is faster short-term and is also, wait a second, what did I write here? Oh yes, it is faster short-term, but it has two funny features. The first thing is that what Wolpe already mentioned, there is a sensitivity, cross-currency sensitivity, because both currencies are sharing the same Celo tank. So transactions are in one currency are changing the price in the other. And this is something that is, it feels a little bit, yeah, unnice. Then this multi-mentor approach is much faster in the double Dpack scenario in opposite directions, which is quite interesting. Then with regard to control, the independent mentor naturally allows independent control of the two buckets, which in multi-mentor is not possible. And this is something which is not so nice. We would have to add some kind of new parameter to control the outflow of Celo Euro and Celo USD separately. Then what we'll see later, the total Celo bucket size requirements, so the total investment that we need to make for one update cycle, it might be slightly smaller for multi-mentor. And another plus for the independent mentor, we kind of think it is field approved. We have a single version right now running, and we know that it's working. It feels adding another independent version feels like this is something that we know already. So the multi-mentor version is something new that we don't have any field approval. And the plus side of the multi-mentor is it would allow direct, cheap Celo Euro, Celo USD swaps. Let me now go to the analysis quickly. I don't have so much time. I try to quickly pick up the most important. Maybe I will not waste time describing the model. I mean, just shortly. I mean, the idea is basically we are setting up tanks for the market maker in both cases. In the first case, we have two independent sets of equations, and in the second one, we have we have three tanks. And then we make a similar assumption for the market. So we have hypothetical market tanks, each one of them representing one of the currencies. And similar to the instantaneous price of the market maker, the instantaneous price of the market maker is just the quotient of the two tanks. We do a similar assumption for the market to get a price sensitivity to the supply and demand of the currencies. And if you do that, you can write down a set of equations. If you scroll down a little bit, just. More. Thanks. Yes. Then you can write down a set of equations. We have a price mismatch, and then we have the arbitrage, and then we have the equilibrium. The equilibrium is the state where the market price is equal to the on-chain price. And these two time points, they are linked by equations. For example, if you look at the second equation, it basically means that the constant product, the constant product before, before the equilibrium, so at time t, is equal to the constant product in the equilibrium. And this is pretty much what you can solve then. You also have some equations for the total amount of coins, and this is all in a single, for the single module is nicely solvable. We had a few problems. We listed all the problems that we had. We listed all the assumptions that we made, because not all of the cases were so easily solvable. Yeah, now let's jump to the first plot. Sorry for being so jumpy, but the time is tight. So if you go for the single Dpack, yes. So I mean, there are different scenarios then that can occur. It can happen that one of the currencies is Dpacked, or two currencies are Dpacked, and then they can be in the same direction or they can be in opposite direction. So these are all the scenarios that we looked at. We picked the Celo USD case here. We could have also picked Celo Euro, of course. And so what you see here in orange, this is what the results that independent Mento would give us. And the blue lines is multi-Mento. The dashed line is the euro, and the solid line is the USD. And as you can see, as I said before, the initial conversion speed of the multi-Mento is faster. So there's this immediate drop, which is much faster than for the independent Mento. But on the other hand, we have this Dpack. So while the Celo USD is pegging, it is depegging the Celo Euro. This will only happen to the point that both of them are the same, and then they will together find the peg. Maybe just one explanation. The x-axis is called number of cycles. What I'm talking about here is one cycle for me is a tank update. Then all the arbitrage opportunities after this tank update are taken. And then there will be, this is for me one cycle. And if I have multiple cycles, it means I have an update or the arbitrage is taken. I still haven't reached the peg after one of these cycles. There will be a new update, new arbitrage, so next cycle and so on. So what you see here is the convergence along these kind of update and arbitrage cycles. And it's not so well visible, but I should have had a table here, but you can see that in the end, the independent Mento is a little bit faster than the multi-Mento. So if we go now to the double Dpack, same direction. We are seeing similar behavior. So in the beginning, it's not so prominent anymore, but in the beginning, the multi-Mento is a little bit faster. We also have this depegging behavior. And then we see the tail behavior of independent Mento being faster a little bit earlier. And now the interesting case, which is the double Dpack in the opposite direction. What is happening here is multi-Mento is just better. It's just faster. And the reason for this is, I mean, as I have mentioned, Celo USD transactions are affecting the Celo tank, which is affecting the price of the Celo Euro. In the cases before, this was against the pegging tendency. I'm sorry for being so vague here. I mean, my plan was to talk about this longer, but so basically, this is the sensitivity that comes from this transaction. It's against the direction of the maintaining the peg. But in the case of a double Dpack in the opposite direction, actually the sensitivity is helping the mechanism. And this is why we see a much faster convergence. Yeah, I think we have not so much time. I would stop here. If you have further questions, ask them in the Q&A or post them in the issue.
Yeah. Just wanted to give folks, if you don't have time to answer, to ask a question, we're going to go to Q&A. Just go to the CIP specification, CIP 33. We have a discussions to link here, and you can always post a question here and stuff if you never got a chance to. But with that, let's go for 8 minutes of Q&A. So anyone who wants to ask a question, go for it.
One question I've been wondering about is, do we have a good grasp on how much running the Minto protocol, I guess, costs the protocol? Costs the network as a whole, I mean?
You mean gas usage?
I mean more like in the arbitrage opportunities, there's some idea of outflow of capital from the reserve. I'm curious if we have a good, how to think about that. I have no idea how to think about that really.
I mean,
it took us a while, yeah, and I think you can explain.
I mean, we have some kind of metric for that. What we are basically doing is, like, whenever the on-chain price falls behind the market price, there is an arbitrage opportunity, and these arbitrage opportunities, they can be if someone is trading this arbitrage opportunity, it can be represented by a cash flow. It basically means that the mechanism is handing out money for free. And it's not exact, but you can use the current market price, the bid and ask, to calculate what amount of cash flow you're losing. And for example, we had a circuit break recently after the Binance announcement. And what we have been seeing there was a negative cash flow of roughly 20K USD. During this circuit break. And I mean, the circuit break naturally creates a delay, and which means it creates a mismatch between the market price and the on-chain price that will be used for arbitrage.
Let me chime in a little bit, because I actually have a bunch of data on that, because I've measured some things, and I can share you what I've measured. So I've measured the full, basically taking the full data of all the exchanges that have happened in the reserve, and to see basically the full inflow of Celo, outflow of Celo, full inflow of CUSD and outflow of CUSD. And then I split this traffic between the arbitraging addresses, which are not very hard to find, can pretty clearly see which ones they are, and the rest of it. And here's the results, and I can share them actually if you ping me afterwards. The one-sided arbitraging traffic, meaning, after all this trading, the single direction one is actually very tiny compared to few whales that are selling massive amounts of Celo. Just to give a sense of the numbers, it's like there are like few accounts that have sold around 6 million Celo for average price of 2.1 or something like that. Whereas the arbitraging, like total one-sided direction, is something like 200,000 Celo on the buy side of average price of 1.7. So the effect of selling is actually 30 times more. So if you're worried about something exploiting reserve or reserve losing money because of CP.do, I would say the other direction is more important to look at into, is this a problem or not? That, you can do like a long-term trading against the CP.do, not like because the thing with arbitrage is that when it trades in one direction, in the other times, then it trades in the other direction. And most of the times it kind of cancels each other out. There is some profit in there, but the profit is actually like the loss to the reserve is not that high. The profit is there for the arbitrage, but loss is not high. I would say the other part of the volume is something to think about. Looking at it, my initial sense was that it's not a problem, but it's like, it's quite a bit, it's quite large, right? So that's something to think about in there.
I mean, I'm happy if you have some data and we can discuss this. It's great. And just one additional point about this 20K that we had. It was interesting because it was basically one address who made all these trades. And it's even more interesting because, one way to take the arbitrage would be to buy from Mento and to sell to the market. But what this address was actually doing, it was buying from Mento and selling to Mento in the same day. So the arbitrage profit was actually this 20K were done by buying and selling from Mento at the same day.
Yeah, those I know pretty clearly what's happening in there. It's just because every price spike a lot of times is followed by price fall.
Yes.
So, you go up with it and then you come down with it. That's just what happens. But the differences are not, those are actually not as bad for the reserve a lot of the times, I would say, because it's kind of like Uniswap, right? If the price goes up, price goes down, it's still fine because of the spread. It's the long-term trading things that I think can be worrisome. I don't know. I think another big thing to think about is when you sell Celo, and this might become important for other assets too. When you sell Celo for CUSD locally, if that doesn't affect the price at the time you're selling it, when you start converting CUSD to USD, right? You take it on exchange and you start converting it, it has a chance to actually decrease the price of Celo at that time. If you bring a significant selling pressure on a stable asset, it can bring selling pressure on Celo itself too. So that's something to think about, that sometimes some of this can have a delayed reaction, meaning right now it looks fine, but if whoever sold that 6 million Celo went and tried to dump all of it at a low price, let's say, 95%, if they're fine with that, that can have an effect on Celo. We'll actually see this play out right now because it's happening a little bit. So you can have an empirical data and see, does this affect or not? Right now is a pretty good time to measure it.
Yeah, I just wanted to close with one thought regarding that. I think now we're seeing a lot of outflows because most of the activity are arbitrageurs are profiting of the delay the price on chain has, the price off chain. But at some point, we are going to start seeing demand for people that want to make a remittance. They need to get the Celo dollars and they should pay the fee. And now that influence of people generating positive inflows, it's still quite low compared to the arbitrageurs. So in the long run, I will expect that to get bigger and generate a little profit for the share. I'm talking independent of the price. I'm talking exclusively about the spread.
I'd like to start putting a pin on the Q&A for a bit. Before we move on to the Cody's proposal, one point I want to ask, which I'll continue asking in the discussions link, is about if there's a way that we can standardize this thing, because it seems that there's a multi-mental model, which seems to, like, from what you're saying, is like the desired kind of approach, right?
Sorry, independent Mento, the
desired approach. Yeah, so I'm curious, based on the step that we would need to implement this, maybe we could come up with a standard for how do you introduce new currencies in the future, that you follow these steps just to make a proposal and stuff like that, and then that can be something we follow. But anyway, that's something that we can take it to the discussions link and stuff. So Cody, from what I understand, you want to start sharing your screen?
Yeah, let me see how to do that.
Right,
so I think I'm gonna take over and share.
All right, I stopped sharing, so the floor is yours.
Sorry, I haven't shared with Zoom before, so I need to update my permissions.
Okay.
Oh no, I actually need to exit in order to update the permissions. Could I send you the link instead?
Yeah.
And
cool.
then you could share it?
Yeah, send it. Man.
Cool. I'll just post it in the chat, and that way everyone else can get access to it.
Cool.
And let me also make it public. There's some links in here too if you want to follow along.
View present. Let's see if I can share screen. All right, can everyone see
Cool.
it? All right, cool.
Yeah, I can see it. Cool, thank you. Yeah, so CIP 32 is all about starting the conversation on attestation node incentives. So today we have these attestation services set up that are really a core piece of the Celo protocol. They allow individuals using Valora and other wallets to associate a phone number with their wallet address so that it makes it really seamless for folks to pay them just using their phone number. I'm sure everyone is super familiar with this, but I'll just quickly go over the protocol at a high level, and that'll just set the foundation for the rest of the discussion. So the first part of it is when a user wants to associate and make this association on chain. They will first make a request on chain. They will pay for the attestation fees, and then they will randomly get paired with a set of 3 issuers, which are these attestation services. Once the pairing has happened, then the wallet will make an outbound request to the attestation service. This is off-chain, and request for an SMS to be sent to their phone number. You'll see in step 2, the attestation service will then call their provider, Twilio as an example, and that will actually send the SMS to the user. So you can see that a huge part of this happens off-chain, which adds to the complexity of the incentives design. So next slide, please. So a lot of the motivation for this proposal comes about because, as I mentioned, this attestation service forms a core piece of the Celo protocol. And as we're looking at ramping up the usage and onboarding in more countries, this becomes a blocking point where we're losing, a set of customers because of the friction introduced by attestation services not being available or not serving certain countries. So here's some stats. 73% currently we have 73% success rate, which is looking at attestations individually. And only 48% of sessions actually make it through the onboarding process, which is pretty low. But it's a combination of other things as well. You can imagine that some folks will just drop out because of the wait time that they have to go through when they're going through the attestations. Some folks may just decide to sign up later and have other things. So there's other efforts that are ongoing on improving the overall onboarding experience, but it's estimated that at least 8% of the termination of these sessions is directly caused by some attestation services being unavailable. So this is a metric that we want to track and improve. And as I mentioned, a lot of the process of this attestation service happens off-chain, which makes it really difficult to measure in a way that we can directly incentivize. And so this proposal tries to address some of that, and also recognizing that it is a first step in this direction. Part of the problem of having these off-chain metrics is that you don't really know whose fault it is. It could be that the user had a poor network connection and the request never actually made it to the attestation service. The attestation service maybe received the request but sent it to their provider, and the provider never sent it. And so, like, there's lots of and it could be that even the user at the end that received the attestation, they weren't able to complete it because of a connection to Forno. So lots of potential issues, and it's difficult to come up with a reliable way to kind of point blame at a particular user in this flow. Additionally, if any, we have whatever metric that we come up with has to be ungameable, or at least like very difficult to game. So if I'm a validator, I shouldn't be able to like negatively affect other validators the score, attestation score. And similarly, I shouldn't be able to like positively influence my own attestation score. And so we'll talk a little bit about that in the next section. So this is the proposal for the MVP solution, the minimum viable product. This is not, by no means does it actually solve the problem entirely, but what it does is it's an attempt to be a step in the right direction. And so we're setting up the framework for introducing these harder incentives, and then from there we can adjust it over time as we like measure the impact of it. So the first proposal is really just a min bar. It should be relatively easy for any online attestation service to hit. The proposal is that over the course of an 11-day window, an attestation service should complete at least one successful attestation. And there, you'll see that there's these three examples that I give. In the first case, even though they had failed, you'll see these little red symbols indicate failed attestation, and the green symbol indicates a successful attestation. In this case, even though they had failed multiple times, because they had succeeded once, then they would have satisfied this criteria. The second case basically shows that they satisfied the criteria because there's not enough data. So they didn't have enough requests routed to their attestation service to be eligible for breaking the condition. And the third case is an example of a true positive where there is enough requests that were routed to this attestation service, and they weren't able to complete even one of them. And so the proposal, this is the proposed metric, and the proposal is that if an attestation service doesn't satisfy this metric, then they would be eligible for slashing. So I think when framing the conversation, we can kind of think of it in two different areas. One is what is the measurement, and there's like variants of that. And then the second part is what is the incentive. And in this case, the proposal is slashing, but we could imagine other things as well. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we'll have a starting point that is very conservative, but all of these parameters that are part of this like slashable measurement are adjustable. So the window length is 11 days. That can be reduced if we want to make it a little bit more strict. And also, as we see more users using the network and onboarding, we can expect that one attestation over the course of 11 days to be a little bit too loose, and we can tighten that up. The minimum attestations requested to be eligible. This is like in the case that you haven't received 3 attestation requests, then you are not eligible for this slashing event. This can be adjusted over time. And then finally, the penalty amount and the penalty reward, similar to other slashing contracts, is adjustable. So when thinking about the starting point for each of these parameters, because this is a new slashing contract, and because this is a new concept of incentivizing attestation service, we want to start very conservatively and gradually increase it and figure out based off of empirical data where the right points are. So the proposal is to start with a very small slashing penalty of 5 Celo. We would have just require one successful attestation over a period of 11 days. 11 days was chosen because over the period that I measured in November, there were an expected number of 10 attestations per validator over an 11-day window. So this would, if you're able to achieve one attestation when you should have had 10, then that's a more conservative starting value. We would only be slashing validators if they were selected for at least 3 attestations. So if there was, you know, some fluke in the randomness and you weren't actually selected to be paired with any user, then you wouldn't be eligible because you haven't really had the opportunity to show that you're online. And then finally, unlike other slashing contracts, this slasher wouldn't affect the slashing multiplier, and it would also not remove the validator unless they dropped below the minimum locked gold requirements. So this is nice in 2 ways. One is it doesn't add an extra penalty, which is the slashing multiplier on the epoch rewards. And 2 is it ensures that we don't have a large number of validators going offline because they were slashed by an attestation service slasher. The reason why we still want to remove them in the case that they drop below the 10K requirement is because I think Victor pointed this out in the discussions. It's because we want to make sure that there's still sufficient stake to cover the other incentives of running a healthy validator node. So you can imagine that if this proposal goes through, it would make sense for validators to add some buffer to their attestate or to their locked gold to be able to cover small slashes in their locked gold amount. So as I mentioned, this is just a first step toward improving the incentives. What we really wanted to do in this proposal initially was to measure the success rate. But as I mentioned, it's difficult to come up with this metric that is non-gameable. Some ideas to prevent it from being gamed are to add an additional attestation on chain for users that are already going through the Comency service, and today they're already solving a reCAPTCHA and performing the device ID checks. So you can imagine this is another on-chain signal that we can use to know that this traffic is legitimate or at least difficult to game. We can also look at success rate where user error is unlikely. So this means looking at failures in attestations where the user had completed other successful attestations. So if a user is required to fill out 3 SMS codes and they filled out 2, but they're missing 1, then it's likely that it wasn't a user error, but rather that third one never arrived to the user. So these, given that we didn't have a lot of traffic up until now, we wanted to kind of wait and see and make sure that we had sufficient data to back these metrics before standing behind it in a proposal. And additionally, this min bar that we set is paired to a slashing penalty, but you could imagine that because it does take extra time and effort to run a highly available attestation service, we could look at increasing the reward as an additional positive incentive rather than just a min bar punishment. And yeah, this is the time to ask questions or to share ideas. There's already been a lot of good discussion happening on the GitHub issue. So definitely encourage more discussion here.
And just to add, if you want to get, I would also encourage everyone to read the specification, CIP 32. So I think it's, let's see. I'm going to share it right now in the chat. But yeah, anyone has any questions, feel free to ask right now. I
have a question. Do you have you run any kind of spec analysis to see, like, would anyone actually fall below this threshold right now? Is there sort of set of nodes that are not completing a single attestation in 11 days?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did do that back check, and I found 2 such attestation services that would have violated this condition. And again,
So-
this is a conservative starting point. So it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be more if we decided to make it more stringent.
I guess my other question would be, is the failure to complete attestations due to few bad nodes, or is it because on average we're just not able to complete attestations? Like, have done that? So if we, let's say, if we remove the bottom 10% performers, right, would the attestation completion rate get better? Or is it that we just need to actually increase the average? Do you have that sense of distribution, what that looks like?
That is a really good idea. I don't have that on hand, but I will. I can imagine how we can look that up. We can basically find different performing attestation services and then look at the users going through them and kind of like isolate the impact.
Yeah, mostly I'm asking because basically a penalty type of thing will remove, at most something like, say, bottom 5% or bottom 10% of performers, right? It will be very hard to raise the minimum bar, if it's within like some sort of a standard deviation from the average, right? So the question is just the average bad? And then that would require a different solution, right? Because if we just take top even 50% of the nodes, the best performing 50%, what is their overall attestation successes look like? And if that's not enough, then maybe we have to take a different direction from the start, because this will only make a marginal improvement, even if any.
Totally. Yep. I think that's a great point. And I know Victor and Amy also have looked a lot into this and built some dashboards. Anything to add from this regard?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and say that, yeah, we're definitely also like in parallel looking at those cases where even our top performing attestation services, how can we improve their success? Because you're right in that our average, we still want to bring that up. We have like some additional features coming out in a new release coming up for the attestation service. But then also, we don't want to just remove poor performing services. That is something that we are exploring as well. But like a lot of our validators are actually doing very well with regards like comparatively across each other. And it takes a lot of effort to like keep this service up and running well, and they are getting compensated the same amount as people who are not performing well. So we want to make sure that it's like people are being compensated fairly for all the effort that they're putting into this.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense to have some sort of rewards based on performance. I'm mostly also talking from personal experience because I do run an attestation node. I think I've put in, all the recommended practices in there, but the completion rate is still actually not that high. There's still plenty of errors that I see percentage-wise, right? So I'm just not even sure, even if, everybody put that effort into it, how much that would change the overall numbers. Because when I see the average, it's something like 20% of the attestations are incomplete. And I think my nodes miss around 10% attestations too. And that's sort of where my question is coming from.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I see this proposal as one of many steps that we can take and have been taking towards improving overall attestation completion success. I think I agree that this proposal, as it's written, will address kind of it will just address one cause of attestation failures, right? Which is that the attestation service is down because there aren't strong enough incentives to keep it up and running. But there's a whole, that is one of many reasons why attestations might fail. And there are other things that we can do to address that may not be incentive related. So I think this is just a piece of the puzzle. And I think it's a good step in the right direction.
York had a question in chat. Can we share the internal verifications metrics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did create a public verifications dashboard, but it doesn't include the nice pipelines that Victor and Amy built. So we can definitely make a public version of that and share that out. I don't think that there's any private data in there.
Just kind of in response to your kind of note on a rewards-based scheme, I'm personally not as convinced that that will work. I think that only works when the cause of the failure, that only works to address failures that are caused by unavailable attestation services run by validators. And I think my personal intuition is that this proposal that Cody has put out will address the overwhelming majority of attestation failures that are caused by attestation service unavailability, but that the remaining kind of attestations that are being completed, like validators, the reasons are outside of validator control, whether that's because the user is in a location or using a telco provider for which SMS delivery is spotty, kind of given the SMS providers that the attestation service supports, or because the UX in Valora is not conducive to to kind of completing attestations at a high rate because it's slow, or because hexadecimal codes are unwieldy, et cetera, et cetera. And so my personal feeling is that investing in rewards to investing further into incentivizing higher completion rates is not likely to yield investing further in incentives to validators to have higher completion rates is only going to be effective if and when is that to run better attestation services other than just being available. And I think the problem we're looking to solve right now is just people being unavailable at times.
In that vein, one thing that's not addressed in the proposal as it stands, but I saw there's some discussion started on this, was that we would need to remove validators from the list of selectable issuers, essentially. At a certain point, especially if the remaining 4 validators who are not currently set up are online, but aren't really doing a good job maintaining their service, or other validators just aren't maintaining their service, the only way to actually improve the rates is to remove them until it's back up again. At least in the meantime, until that happens. I guess at this point, the scheme is more about punishing them until they put it back up again. But in the meantime, there's no increase in the actual service reliability as observed by users until that happens.
Yeah, I think that was a really good proposal that Ziad made. I view this as a way, not necessarily an incentive, but more as a way to protect users from a downed attestation service.
That's kind of our goal at the end of the day, right? I mean, having the best possible user experience while also being secure and secure and reliable.
Yep.
Yeah, I think my point was that if you, instead of slashing, if you're blocking them, then you can be much more aggressive into your thresholds, right? Because even if a mistake is made, worst case, they're just blacklisted. It's not a You're not slashing their Celo or potentially getting their validator unelected, right? That's the benefit of it, because you can really increase the minimum threshold to something pretty high, and then you can, then you need some reason for people to run the attestation nodes, right? And that's where the rewards coming in, because right now it's more like you have to run the attestation node, and unless you do a good job, you get penalized. Whereas in the other case, it's more like, if you're running an attestation node, you better do a good job or it just won't do anything, right? You're just wasting your efforts. And then you have additional incentives into why you should run an attestation node to begin with. Because the issue I see is, it's like, imagine something like Anchorage and CoinList and people like that running validators, right? Do you really want them to also deal with like signing up for Twilio and Nexmo accounts, and then you reaching out to them and being like, hey, we changed the messaging thing and now you have to sign up for this one that requires you to set up a different payment thing? I feel like larger players running validators might have more annoying time running attestation node, because it's a very different kind of thing from just securing the network, right? So that's where that's sort of my thinking into only have people who actually want to run the attestation nodes run it, right? And then have sufficient incentives that there will be enough people who actually want to do it for those incentives.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think we're currently over time by 1 minute. The one ask I would have, since we're getting a lot of questions and feedback on these proposals, is to continue the discussions on the links for these specifications on GitHub. And yeah, we can continue taking it from there and revisit it in a future all-core dev call. So yeah, with that said, I want to thank Cody and Nadine for giving us a great presentation today. Really interesting topics. I'm really excited for the future of Celo. And with that said, take care, everyone, and see you later.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.